Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today. My name is Trey Miller, and I'm a principal researcher at American Institutes for Research. As most of you know, I've been leading AIR's study of dual credit education in Texas. We released a draft report for public comment at the July 26th THECB board meeting. The draft report did not include any policy recommendations, as we wanted to engage with stakeholders across Texas to help better contextualize our findings and develop practical recommendations that are grounded in the study findings and the overall body of research on dual credit, and that are mindful of their impact on stakeholders. We received public comment on the study through the end of August 2018 and spent the month of September distilling those comments, as well as additional feedback we've received through other means, making appropriate revisions to the report and drafting a set of policy recommendations. The goal of today's webinar is to share the most common themes from the public comments we received and how we modified the report in response, and to share the study recommendations. After the presentation, we'll welcome questions from the audience. So please submit your questions through the chat box, and we'll answer as many as we can during the webinar. So I'd like to formally thank the Texas Higher Education Foundation, Houston Endowment, Greater Texas Foundation, Educate Texas Communities Foundation of Texas, and the Meadows Foundation for their generous financial support of this project. I'll start off the webinar by briefly summarizing the study findings. Next, I'll summarize the public comments we received and share our recommendations. I'll close by providing a timeline and next steps. So the primary conclusion of our study is that dual credit benefits Texas and its students. We draw this conclusion based on several pieces of evidence. First, the benefits of dual credit far exceed the cost. For every dollar spent on delivering dual credit, $5 is produced in return. The monetary value placed on this return is derived from higher incomes, improved health, and increased tax revenue, among other benefits from increased educational attainment and reduced time to degree. Second, dual credit increases college access and completion and decreases time to degree. So I want to make 2 points about this finding. First, past studies have documented that participating in dual credit is associated with many academic benefits, like higher college enrollment and completion. But until our study, no one had really determined whether those improvements are a direct result of dual credit programs in and of themselves. This is the first study that we're aware of that shows that participating in dual credit makes a positive difference in improving college access and completion, and that it's a true causal effect. Second, it's important to remember that our impact study excludes early college high schools. At the start of the study, there was clear evidence that early college high schools improve outcomes for a broad array of students, yet there is considerably less evidence examining the impact of dual credit programs delivered in the traditional high school setting, which offers students fewer supports and does not explicitly target students at risk of dropping out of high school. At the same time, only 17% of students who enrolled in dual credit in the 2017-18 academic year in Texas did so in an early college high school, clearly indicating that early college high school students make up a minority of Texas dual credit students. So for these reasons, we felt that our study would make the largest contribution by focusing on finding the impact of dual credit in traditional high schools. So third, dual credit and college credit only courses appear to be equivalent in terms of academic content, the rigor of student assignments, and grading standards. A systematic examination of course syllabi, student assignments, and graded student work, and survey responses submitted by instructors of English composition and college algebra courses uncovered few differences between dual credit and college credit-only versions of those courses. Although we collected material from a limited sample of instructors of just 2 common courses, the results suggest that concerns that dual credit courses are not as rigorous as college credit-only courses may not hold. Like any intervention, there are aspects of dual credit that could be improved. So I'd like to focus on 3 that our study identified. First, the benefits of dual credit delivered in traditional high schools are lower for disadvantaged student groups. So why might this be the case? Our research points to 2 key reasons. First, disadvantaged students had lower levels of academic preparation when they took dual credit. When we examine the impact of dual credit for disadvantaged students with higher standardized test scores, we have found the effects to be positive. This suggests that dual credit in traditional high schools benefits students who are more academically prepared. Second, we know from a large body of research that disadvantaged students have fewer mentors and college-educated family members that can help them navigate the complexities of college and encounter formidable challenges that may negatively impact their success. So the robust supports embedded in early college high schools, like academic preparation services, regular tutoring, and intrusive advising, may increase benefits of dual credit for students with more challenging backgrounds and educational histories. Second, the quality of advising varies considerably and is inadequate to ensure dual credit students transfer credits directly to their major. Interviews with college advisors and high school guidance counselors suggested that dual credit advising is mostly driven by high school guidance counselors. Concern is not that counselors are on the front lines, but they often lack the resources and knowledge to provide adequate advising to dual credit students. We also found that a lack of coordination between advising staff from high schools and colleges may lead to inefficient dual credit course taking, particularly when students are considering enrolling at private or out-of-state colleges. Third, costs may deter some students from participating in dual credit. We draw this conclusion based on several pieces of evidence. First, being economically disadvantaged explains a significant share of the gap in dual credit participation across race and ethnicity. Second, counselors and advisors told us that the cost of tuition and textbooks is often an obstacle for many students. Finally, many partnerships absorb all or part of tuition costs for low-income students, yet many are unable to do so due to financial constraints. So we received a total of 42 comments from interested stakeholders during the public comment period. Thank you to everyone who provided feedback and comments. We will post a table on the Coordinating Board Dual Credit Study website that summarizes all of the comments received, along with a count of the number of times each comment was received. The table will also be included in the final report. During the webinar, I'll share the comments that were made most frequently and describe how we modified the report in response to each. First, 24 comments expressed concerns related to the methodology we use for the causal impact study. So we recognize there are always limitations with any study's methodology. The study's gone through AIR's rigorous QA process, has been presented at 2 academic conferences, and we're working with a faculty member and the economics department at the University of Texas at Austin to publish a peer-reviewed journal article based on the causal impact findings. So we're confident in the findings. But that said, given the high-profile nature of the report, we also decided to send it out to an additional external reviewer who is a respected researcher in the field of economics of education. The reviewer agreed that we made appropriate choices in designing the causal impact study and that our estimates are an improvement over those reported in past descriptive studies, but also offered additional insights on limitations. In particular, there are a number of factors that could cause our estimates to misstate the true effect of dual credit, but the most plausible factors would all cause us to overstate the effect. Since descriptive studies would also overstate the effect of dual credit, the reviewer agreed that our estimates are likely closer to the truth than those reported in past studies. In the final report, we have revised the section describing the study methodology to make it more clear, and we've provided significantly more detail on the limitations of the methodology and sources of potential bias in our estimates. Second, 13 comments suggested we should include early college high schools in the causal impact study. So at the time we designed the causal impact study, 2 experimental studies had already demonstrated that early college high schools are an effective means to increase college participation and completion, particularly for disadvantaged students. We really didn't want to reinvent the wheel and instead wanted to examine the impact of dual credit as delivered in traditional high school settings, where much less rigorous existed and the vast majority of students experience dual credit programs currently. In the final report, we have better highlighted the existing research on early college high schools and drawn upon it to contextualize our findings and make our policy recommendations that reflect the findings from our study, as well as the overall body of research on dual credit education. For example, we believe that the overall body of evidence suggests that early college high schools should play a critical role in helping Texas continue to close the dual credit participation gap by race and ethnicity, while also ensuring that students are adequately prepared and have necessary supports to succeed in dual credit courses. We've also made it more clear throughout where findings from different components of the study speak to different approaches to dual credit. 6 comments suggested that we should rewrite the executive summary to better distill the most important findings of the study. We agree with this comment wholeheartedly, and the final report includes a completely new executive summary. 4 comments suggested the report should include more regional data. So we agree regional data is crucial for gaining a thorough understanding of any policy in a large and diverse state like Texas. The RAND report included significant regional data in the Phase 1 report, so the final report now explicitly points to this regional data. 4 comments suggested that our study pointed to the need for improved advising and degree planning for dual credit students. So we agree, and this is one of the study recommendations. 3 comments applauded our work on rigor and suggested more studies should be conducted. We appreciate the praise, and we agree that it is important for institutions to continue to focus on ensuring their dual credit courses are as rigorous as college credit-only courses. So one of the study recommendations reflects this view. So now to recommendations. If Texas intends to meet the overarching goal of 60 by 30 PX, as well as its supporting goals, it must ensure that dual credit education programs benefit all students, particularly those who face formidable challenges accessing, completing, and affording college. The recommendations, which are based on the results of this study and the overall body of evidence on dual credit, offer stakeholders guidelines on how to strengthen and improve dual credit education as it continues to expand and evolve to meet the needs of an increasingly diverse student population. So our first recommendation is to ensure that students are adequately prepared to succeed in and have the necessary supports to benefit from dual credit education programs delivered in traditional high schools. So our study suggests that academic preparation is important for ensuring student success in dual credit programs delivered in traditional high school settings. Results from the causal impact study demonstrated that, on average, disadvantaged students benefited less from participating in dual credit education than their non-disadvantaged peers, in part because they had lower scores on 8th grade reading and math standardized tests. Notably, for disadvantaged students who achieved test scores 1 standard deviation above the average score, participating in dual credit programs delivered in traditional high school settings improved a range of college outcomes. This finding is promising and shines yet another spotlight on the urgency of closing persistent subgroup gaps that too often emerge and grow during students' elementary and secondary pathways. While our evidence points to lower academic preparation as one way to explain disparities in college access and completion among dual credit students, other research suggests more reasons as well, which our study was not able to fully investigate. For example, many studies suggest that low-income students and students of color have fewer college-educated family members and mentors who can help them navigate the complexities of college. Furthermore, other studies show that these types of students encounter formidable challenges and life stressors, such as taking care of younger siblings and working multiple jobs to support their family, that making access and succeeding in college an even more difficult endeavor. To increase the benefit of participating in college-level coursework for those students, dual credit education should be designed and structured to meet the academic, informational, and financial needs of students in these circumstances. Experimental research on early college high school suggests that dual credit education programs that embed strong student services such as regular tutoring and intrusive advising show promise in supporting students who have been traditionally underserved by the K-12 education system. Our advising study also suggests that early college high school students have greater access to these types of supports as they navigate dual credit courses and pathways into college. Identifying which student supports efficiently and effectively increase the success of traditionally underserved students enrolled in dual credit education is an area that merits attention and further research, particularly in light of the continuing expansion of dual credit education programs in Texas. Our second recommendation is to strive to ensure that costs neither serve as a barrier for students to participate in dual credit education, nor inhibit higher education institutions from offering affordable and high-quality dual credit education programs. High school guidance counselors told us the costs of tuition, fees, and books were barriers to dual credit participation, And we saw that income plays a role in the gap in dual credit participation across race and ethnicity. This suggests that the cost of delivering dual credit education programs, when shifted to students, may weigh heaviest on low-income students and their families. Furthermore, we estimated the average cost of delivering dual credit education at $111 per semester credit hour, an amount over and above what it would cost to deliver the same credit hour for only high school credit. Meanwhile, the state revenue to offset those costs was derived primarily from contact hour funding and averaged $38 per semester credit hour. To make up that gap, many community colleges charge dual credit students tuition and fees, and many school districts require them to pay for textbooks and other course materials. While charging students tuition and fees to cover a proportion of delivery costs is reasonable, it may come at the expense of broadening access to dual credit education. From our analysis, we found that providing dual credit students some kind of financial relief would involve a financial loss for the college or the school district, particularly when they are unable to rely on other revenue streams to make up that difference. Indeed, even the best resource institutions and districts may reach a point where offering tuition and fee waivers to dual credit students becomes unsustainable. Left unchecked, these issues could exacerbate inequities in dual credit participation by race, ethnicity, and income. However, it's important to note that when considering ways to boost funding for dual credit programs to address these issues, policymakers should really consider trade-offs with respect to other uses of state resources, scarce state resources. Our third recommendation is to continue to close gaps in dual credit participation rates across race and ethnicity. So Texas has made considerable progress in increasing the rate at which students of color participate in dual credit education. However, a significant gap in participation rates by race and ethnicity continues to persist. As previously discussed, our analyses suggest there are disparities. These disparities are driven by differences not only in levels of academic preparation, but also income and the types of high schools that students attend. So to narrow these disparities, stakeholders should invest in initiatives starting as early as elementary and middle school that level the playing field of post-secondary opportunity for all students, regardless of their resource levels or degrees of college exposure. Stakeholders also must ensure efforts to close gap in dual credit participation do not encourage or incentivize academically underprepared high school students to enroll unless the incentives are coupled with robust academic services and supports to ensure students are able to reach their academic potential and goals without falling farther behind as a result of their participation. Continuing to scale effective and well-implemented early college high school programs that are targeted at disadvantaged students could play a vital role in helping the state to close the participation gap while also ensuring that disadvantaged students benefit from dual credit education programs. Our fourth recommendation is to encourage institutions to continue developing and implementing processes to ensure dual credit courses remain as rigorous as college credit only courses. So our study found encouraging evidence on the rigor of dual credit courses relative to those taught for college credit only. We collected detailed course materials, including graded student assignments from instructors of college algebra and English composition courses, and we found few differences between dual credit and college credit only versions of those courses. Our study was limited in that we only had the resources to look at 2 courses from a limited number of instructors. More work would need to be completed to show that all dual credit courses are as rigorous as college credit only courses. However, findings from our study give some pause to immediate concerns that dual credit courses, as implemented in Texas, may not be as rigorous as college credit only courses at community colleges. Either way, it's important to emphasize that 2- and 4-year colleges should continue monitoring and assessing the academic rigor of dual credit courses to ensure students benefit from dual credit education after they graduate from high school. One approach to ensuring equivalence in academic rigor includes developing common assessments that would be administered to dual credit and college credit only students and would assess differences in performance on those assessments between both student groups. Another approach could involve using college credit only and dual credit instructors to jointly grade dual credit student assignments and tests based on academic benchmarks set for college credit only courses. Finally, we encourage practitioners to draw from the rubric we developed for this study to assess similarities and differences between dual credit and college credit only courses for content, student assignments, and grading standards. Our fifth recommendation is to improve advising processes and ensure equitable access to high-quality advising for dual credit students. Through our research on dual credit advising, we found that the bulk of the advising services offered to dual credit education students is provided much more so by high school guidance counselors than by college advisors. The concern is not that high school guidance counselors are on the front lines, but they often lack the resources, time, and knowledge to provide advising to bring a college perspective lens to the guidance they provide to dual credit students. To be certain, high school counselors are invaluable in ensuring dual credit students stay on track to satisfy their high school graduation requirements and are typically in a better position than college advisors to assess students' emotional readiness for the expectations and culture of college classroom environments. Still, our study suggests that the quality of advising could be enhanced if dual credit partnerships engaged in several efforts. First, partners should more directly engage with college advisors in counseling and guiding the course-taking choices of dual credit students. College advisors typically have more experience, insights, and access to information about credit transfer policies and are able to direct students into courses that map directly onto the requirements of a particular major. Respondents in our advising study also highlighted the benefits of students hearing directly from a college advisor, noting that guidance from college advisors tend to bear more weight in their decisions. Second, partners should start advising potential dual credit students early. Early advising could involve asking students to explore college and career options and helping students and their families decide whether and when to pursue dual credit education, particularly for students who have the option of dual credit education as early as their 9th or 10th grade years. Finally, both college advisors and high school counselors indicated that formal dual credit education specific training was often lacking, and that providing this type of training could fill in information gaps that are necessary in helping dual credit students make smart choices while taking dual credit level course or college level coursework. For next steps, we will post answers to questions and summarize feedback we've received during today's webinar on the Coordinating Board's Dual Credit Study website by October 10th. We will make appropriate revisions to the report and recommendations based on feedback received through this Q&A session. The final report will be submitted to the Coordinating Board at the October 25th THECB board meeting. Also at that board meeting, dual credit will be a major policy discussion. So I will participate in a panel discussion on dual credit with other researchers who have studied dual credit in Texas and nationally. So thank you, and I'm now happy to answer any questions you may have. As a reminder, please submit questions or provide feedback through the chat box on the right-hand, is typically on the right-hand side of your screen. So I'll answer as many questions as possible during the webinar, but we'll post answers to all questions and summarize feedback received in a document to be posted on the Coordinating Board's Dual Credit Study website by October 10th. So with that, let's begin the Q&A session. Let's see.
There's only one question.
I'm trying to, how do we open this? Sorry, we're having trouble viewing the questions that are have been posted. So the first question, are copies of the presentation or video going to be available? Yes, we're going to post copies of the presentation and a video of the webinar by October 10th, along with answers to the questions received. Let's see, so is there a difference in rigor of dual credit classes offered at high school versus college offered courses? So we looked at differences and we did not see systematic differences between those offered by high school teachers versus college instructors. So it wasn't really those on high school campus versus college campus, it was the differentiation was based on whether the instructor was also concurrently a high school teacher employed in a school district as a high school teacher. And we found no systematic differences between those two courses or types of courses. I'm confused about the question, so I'll answer that later. So no question, just wanted to thank you all for being so responsive to public feedback. Thank you for that feedback. And we're doing our best to be as responsive as possible, and we're really, listening to what the feedback we've heard from all stakeholders, and we think we've significantly improved the report, and particularly the communication of the findings. So appreciate any feedback on that, so that we can continue to improve our messaging. Could you clarify which recommendations are for policymakers versus practitioners? That's a very good question, and haven't really thought explicitly about that yet. So I think we can answer that in the Q&A document after we have some time to think about it. Implied there was a difference between the rigor of dual credit and college classes. How did you arrive at this conclusion? So we concluded that there was little difference between dual credit and college credit only courses. So we arrived at that conclusion by a systematic examination of student work products, graded student assignments, a survey of dual credit instructors. We developed a rubric that was based on an existing framework, research-based framework, to assess those courses and those materials. And when we looked at those materials, not knowing, the format of the course or the modality of the course, whether it was dual credit or college credit only, there were little differences along the rubric. So our conclusion is that we found little difference, no difference really, in the rigor and course materials. And we want to make sure that that everyone understands that. Thank you for acknowledging that an increase in advising requirements or decrease in student financial obligations will require funding from some source. An unfunded mandate would be unsustainable for both K-12 and community college systems. So thank you for making that point. That is clearly what our cost study has identified and pointed out, that the revenues coming in when delivering to cover the cost of delivering dual credit are not completely covering the costs of delivering those courses. The gap, if it were a college credit only course, tuition makes up most of that gap. And we see that in our analysis too. When tuition was charged, it did cover most of the gap in revenue and cost. But we recognize that institutions would prefer not to charge tuition and fees and offer as many fee waivers as possible. And it's a difficult issue with the potential impact on inequities and participation by race and ethnicity. Dual credit should ideally be accessible to as many students as possible. So thank you for making that point. Let's see. Did you examine the problem of transferring credits from community colleges to four-year colleges and how that impacts success? So we did not explicitly examine the problem of transferring credits. We did look at the impact of participating in dual credit on total semester credit hours to degree for four-year degrees. So those students would either start in a two-year college and transfer to a four-year college and complete a degree, or they would enroll directly in a four-year college outside of high school and would experience potentially issues around transfer credit. And our study showed that the impact on total semester credit hour to degree, participating in dual credit increased total semester credit hour to degree, including the dual credit semester credit hours, by a little over 4 semester credit hours. That's for the average dual credit participant. And so that is consistent with there being some potential transfer credit loss. And we did not dig explicitly into how that occurs or why, but that's about as far as we could get into it. But it is an issue we recognize, and it came up in our advising study as well. So in examining costs, were you able to tease out negative versus dollar ranges of costs, or by whether costs were due to tuition, books, etc.? So we examine these issues. I'll answer this by the Q&A document. I'm a little confused about the question, and I'll think more about it. But I'll include a response in the actual Q&A document that we'll post. If disadvantaged students are possibly not as academically ready as peers for success in dual credit, does that possibly implicate an issue with TSI scores as a reasonable prerequisite for starting dual credit? That could be one option for ensuring that all students are prepared to take dual credit courses, as requiring passing the TSIA as before taking a dual credit course. I think there could be other ways to achieve that. And I think it's again, I want to point to the early college high school model, where there are significant activities embedded in that model, where students early on are receiving test prep and other services to help them become college ready and demonstrate college readiness, either through mostly through passing the TSIA. Those are crucial. That's a crucial part of the early college model that I think is potentially a good approach to emulate for other dual credit courses, particularly when delivered to 9th and 10th graders. But I think we're getting more in, not at the level of policy or recommendations, but at ways to implement or address those issues. The key issue that we identified is the one that you highlighted, that disadvantaged students were less prepared than other dual credit participants on average, and we need to find a way to address that and ensure that students are adequately prepared and have sufficient supports to succeed in dual credit courses, regardless of their backgrounds. And there are many ways that you could consider going about doing that. Will there be an attempt to include data from high schools that have an early college? In most components of the study, speak to early colleges. It's really just the causal impact piece of the study, looking at the impact of dual credit for students in traditional high schools. So Early college high schools are included in the cost study. They're also included in in the advising study and in the rigor component. They're also included in some of the descriptive analyses. So we looked at in the racial disparities component and in enrollment and kind of participation and the descriptive findings since before and after House Bill 505. So with respect to the impact study, again, we really want to point to the evidence that's out there on the impact of early college high schools as when that is experimental and well done. And we are highlighting that in our report and drawing on it to make appropriate recommendations, I think. It's difficult. We really couldn't include early college high schools in the causal impact study because of the way we've designed it, and we think it's inappropriate in a way because they are really a different model, a model with much more rich support, so that you're looking at the impact of different models and approaches to dual credit. So that's Are there difficulty in SACS accreditation issues with these classes? We really didn't study that in detail. I think one issue that continues to come up and was raised, and came up in our cost study, for example, is just getting the need to get instructors credentialed to meet SACS requirements to teach a dual credit course. So particularly when high school instructors are teaching dual credit courses, they often don't before they take courses, they have to get credentialed up. So they have to take 18 semester credit hours in their major and obtain a master's degree. A lot of times, and for the most part, at least in the partnerships that we examine, high schools and school districts were taking on a lot of the costs of supporting their teachers to receive education and become credentialed. So I wouldn't say it's an issue with SACS accreditation, but it's an issue that comes up partly because of SACS accreditation, but probably for good reason, as the instructors are teaching college level material, and that's a requirement of any college level course according to SACS. So did you evaluate the student outcomes once they entered the university compared to those without dual credit? So we looked at the impact of taking dual credit or participating in dual credit on completing 2- and 4-year degrees. For example, so most of our outcomes, track students into 4-year colleges. We found that taking a dual credit course improves college enrollment and completion rates at 2- and 4-year colleges. The enrollment effects were more channeling through 2-year colleges, but I think we did find positive effects on 4-year enrollment completion as well, particularly for some student groups. We didn't look explicitly at course performance or anything like that in 4-year colleges explicitly, but we did see that taking a dual credit course increased the probability of completing a 4-year degree. So one possible recommendation to control costs passed on to students could be in textbook materials rather than tuition and college fees. In my practitioner experience, the books are often more expensive than the student's tuition, and because editions of the book are changed so frequently, they often cannot purchase a used book. So that's a good point, and we will take note of it. I think we were really wanting our recommendations to not get too deep in the weeds. We wanted to highlight areas of concern and areas where dual credit programs as implemented we thought could be improved based on our research and the overall body of evidence on dual credit. And we think that, coming up with explicit ways to do that, we can offer some suggestions, but we don't want to make our recommendations too explicit, because we think that that's really something that, stakeholders and, policymakers need to really think about and flesh out more concretely. But we definitely appreciate the comment, and it makes perfect sense and seems appropriate as one possible way to do that. So thank you. Since the majority of students may not know their college major, how can you improve advising? So that's a big question. I think our advising study offered some areas for improvement. Particularly, I think the biggest area is just ensuring that college advisors are more deeply involved in the advising process. Our study kind of, basically showed that dual credit advising was mostly handled by high school guidance counselors who may not have all of the knowledge and experience related to college issues, and particularly with transfer credit issues, and thinking about if a student does have a potential major or meta major or class of majors that they're interested in or field of study, what course would be relevant for them and good for them to take. So I think finding ways to better involve the college advisors in the process would be important, and there are many ways to do that. In particular, I think the recommendations set forth by both TAC and the coordinating board to require declaring a major after a certain number of dual credit courses is one appropriate response and potential response to this broader broader recommendation around improving advising. It's one of many potential approaches. A lot of them are more practice oriented and just giving kind of advice and guidance to institutions and practitioners about ways to do this and better engage the college advisors in the process. So the findings seem to show that disadvantaged students who take dual credit have better outcomes at community colleges and at universities. Is that a correct interpretation? And if so, do you have any additional thoughts on that? So I will respond to this particular question via the Q&A document. I believe that's a correct interpretation, but I want to dig into the results and make a little more sense of it before I answer in detail. Could you share any barriers that may exist between the high school perception and college perception of dual credit student enrollment? That's a big question. I think another one I think I'll answer on the Q&A document at a later time. There's a lot that I could say there, and I want to make sure that I say I have the most appropriate response. Were any dual credit courses that were part of the study taught online? Online courses may provide high school students better access. So in the causal impact study, where we looked at the impact of taking dual credit, that included online dual credit courses. So that's true. All of the quantitative analyses included online courses. So we even looked at kind of growth and changes in the share of courses that were taught online versus not before and after House Bill 505. I'm not sure if the rigor component included an online course. It may have included one. I will check with the leader of that particular task on the study and the rigor study to see if that's the case. I think that's a good point, that online courses could provide better access or more access. I think it can possibly be challenging to provide adequate advising with online courses if they're taught at significant distance. There are things that can be overcome, and this, I think students today are more and more accustomed to working with technology and talking with folks remotely than any of us on the webinar right now we're used to. So, I think some of the challenges that we as students might have faced as students with that may be less salient today, but it's hard to say. So good point, and I think it warrants more study. We have data of middle school students who declare an House Bill 5 endorsement pathway and continue to follow that major through secondary and to post-secondary education. We did not look at that explicitly in our study. I do know that there is another AIR study in partnership with TEA looking explicitly at House Bill 5, and I believe that they have been looking at college enrollment and participation, and they certainly intend to track students through college. So I can make a link to the most recent report on that study for you in the Q&A document that we'll post. And I'm sure that my colleagues here at AIR would be more than happy to talk more about the House Bill 5 study that they're leading. Often dual credit students enter high school with enough semester credit hours to be sophomore or juniors. Was there any evaluation as to the impact on students who might move right into the upper division courses as first-time college students? So, we did look, and it included in the appendix, we looked at impact of taking more semester credit hours of dual credit. I didn't see clear patterns in those results. So we didn't do as much as I think this question would, merit in terms of, I think it's an important thing, question to look into, and I think it's something that should be looked at in future research. Let's see. So in examining costs, where you're able to relate fees, not tuition, to student services provided, advising, orientation, etc. So I don't believe we looked explicitly at whether charging those tuition and fees related to additional services or costs, but I will consult with the cost study team and see if they looked at that question and provide an answer on the Q&A document. It's a good question. So students are already required to pass TSIA before starting dual credit. However, because disadvantaged students are still not performing as well, perhaps TSIA is not an aligned indicator of readiness. I believe that is true. We looked at some data on whether students were passing TSIA or getting into dual credit through potentially other means, such as having sufficient scores on the end of course exams in algebra and English. So, I'm not 100% convinced based on that evidence that is not sufficiently rigorous, I think, to want to share in a very public way, but I'm not as completely convinced that all students who are taking any dual credit course have passed the TSIA. We don't have evidence of that in the data, but there are limitations with how you can even approach that given existing data sources. So I think a lot of colleges and high schools are really focused on ensuring that students pass TSIA before they take any dual credit course. I'm not sure if all are, and I'm not sure if it's explicit in the current state policy that it is a requirement. So I think it's an open question, and it's a hard one to assess given current data. So let's see, I'll answer that in the Q&A. If appropriate at this time, I'd like to know your opinion or findings concerning an appropriate time for high schools to complete TSI testing when considering TSI mastery of content. I don't think our study points to any particular time of passing TSI and starting to take dual credit courses. I think, if a student passes a TSIA and is college ready, then, and the course that he or she would take is aligned with his or her high school, degree requirements, it would be, an appropriate time most likely to take a dual credit course. I can't say explicitly, but I would say based on what I know now, that's what I would say. If you can pass a TSIA, then you should be able to take a dual credit course if you can benefit from doing so with given where you are in your high school degree plan. Not sure what that's a question. Or so there's been a significant increase in the use of software codes to enhance textbook material. This has driven the cost of materials for the class. That's a good point, so I will take note of that. Software codes. So there's a few points that people have made that I think help us continue to better contextualize our findings that I'm not reading out explicitly right now. After reviewing the report, which is very robust, so my compliments, I found myself puzzling over the comments respecting rigor. Page 47 notes that there was concerns that the data seemed to indicate there was grade inflation. Was this reflective of all dual credit courses across all delivery locations by all instructors? And if so, do you think this could be a function of increased proportions or students taking non-academic courses? And the question kind of goes on. So thank you for the positive feedback. Regarding that finding we had in the interim report of potential grade inflation, after reflecting on that finding and receiving feedback, we felt that the evidence we made that statement about dual credit, what we had seen was that dual credit course grades had gone up for 9th and 10th graders, while the 8th grade standardized test scores of dual credit participants in those grades had gone down. After considering that evidence more concretely, we don't think it's enough evidence to really point to grade inflation as the cause of that. It may be a cause, it may be related, it may be systematic of grade inflation, but we just don't think there was enough evidence to really make concrete conclusions on that. So really the main findings with respect to rigor in our study are from the rigor component of the study, where we assessed course materials and found little differences in the rigor of dual credit courses versus college credit only courses. And so that's what I think we point to, and we've revised the study and the findings and communication accordingly. So that finding is been removed or downplayed, and we think appropriately. I think we have time for one more question here. I believe the state of Florida no longer mandates a TSI-like test. Perhaps we need to examine how this impacts success. That's a good point. I'm not sure how that applies to dual credit. I do know it applies in college readiness and coming to college full time right out or part time right out of high school, and whether or not you're are required to take developmental courses or not. I'm not sure how that's being applied in the state of Florida for dual credit purposes. Yeah, a good point. Okay, I think we've answered that. We're running up on the 11 o'clock hour, so we will end the webinar now, but as I said, we will provide a response document with answers to the questions that have been posed, that are all really great questions, and get that out by October 10th. So we thank everyone for your participation in the webinar today, and for your participation in the study more generally. We hope that it's been informative and useful for thinking about how to improve dual credit education, and we're committed to continuing to improve the study and communication of findings. So thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your day and weekend. Study.